Okay, so in Chainsaw Man, there's been a ton of religious symbolism, ranging from paintings to crucifixes to literal angels, and today we're about to break down how these biblical clues can help us solve the biggest mysteries in the series. During this video, I'll be piecing together evidence from the manga to explain the true origin of all devils, Pochita's real identity, and the meaning behind Makima's decorations. Along the way, we'll also explain how the personality of certain devils was influenced by Christian mythology, but before we dive into it, just know that there will be some manga spoilers ahead. Alright, so the core of this theory begins with the Angel Devil, who's the one character that can help us link all the evidence together. If you're watching this video, you're probably aware that each devil in Chainsaw Man represents something humans are afraid of, and in Angel's case, he represents the angels we're used to hearing about in Christianity. Within the Bible, one of the main roles of these supernatural spirits is to communicate messages from God, and when we look into it, the word angel literally translates to messenger. When it comes to the Angel Devil, he's played the role of messenger on a couple of occasions, in that he's delivered important messages to the audience directly from the author himself. The most obvious example of what I mean came in chapter 53, in which Fujimoto used his messenger devil to fundamentally change our understanding of the Chainsaw Man universe. Up until that chapter, all we knew about this world is that it's an alternate version of Earth where devils live alongside humanity. Beyond that, our knowledge of this universe was virtually nothing. But in chapter 53, Angel opened our eyes when he revealed the existence of a place called Hell. I'm sure most of you watching would agree that it can't be a coincidence that Angel, the character with the most blatant connection to Christianity, was the one chosen to explain that hell is a real dimension. Personally, I think the reason Fujimoto chose him to say this message was to demonstrate that Angel could be trusted when it came to biblical topics, and when the story then physically took us to hell later on, it proved that everything he was saying was correct. Bearing that in mind, a major detail in the manga that was super easy to miss is that in chapter 49, Angel already confirmed that heaven exists as well. In this scene, a dying woman reaches out to him during her final moments, and he then bends down, holds her hand, and says to her, "It's okay, you're going to heaven." If any other character had said those words, honestly, I wouldn't really have cared, but for the Angel Devil to say it, someone whose name has links to both heaven and hell, and someone who revealed that one of those dimensions is already real, we need to take it seriously. If we assume for a second that Angel is foreshadowing heaven in the same way he foreshadowed hell, then this genuinely helps to explain all the mysteries we spoke about in the intro. Starting off with the meaning behind Makima's painting, in chapter 81 we saw that inside her apartment was an illustration from French artist Gustave Doré. The name of this painting is The Fall of Lucifer, and it depicts Satan being cast out of heaven and making his way down to earth. What makes this backstory especially interesting is that in the book of Revelations, it describes how when Satan fell from heaven, there were a huge amount of angels who decided to follow him. To be specific, the passage explains how 1/3 of stars in the night sky were flung to earth, referring to the fact that 1/3 of the angels chose to rebel against God and follow Satan instead. These fallen angels were referred to in the Bible as demons, which is a phrase that could easily be replaced by the word devils, and they were the ones who chose to side with Lucifer in the war against the Creator. On top of that, Makima having this painting became even more suspicious when we remember that in the very next chapter she said how she and Angel had differences in faith. At the time that chapter came out, we had no idea what differences in faith could mean, but obviously, if the fallen angels were on the side of Satan while the good angels put their faith in God, then the picture starts to become clearer. When we met Angel for the first time, he'd lost all memories of his previous life, but thanks to Makima, we know that he couldn't have been a follower of Satan, because in chapter 83, she confirmed that he was a follower of Chainsaw Man. This is what brings us to the most important part of the theory, which is the reveal of Pochita's real identity and the reason why he's so powerful. To begin, something you need to know is that within Christian mythology, angels in heaven are divided into 9 separate rankings. Each of those rankings has its own unique name, and what's amazing is that when we look at the followers of Chainsaw Man, all of their names are directly connected. For instance, the highest ranked angels in the Bible are the Seraphim, who were the ones closest to God. And in this panel, it's the devil called Seraphim who was the one closest to Denji and Makima. As you can see, Seraphim is also the only one of Chainsaw Man's followers who doesn't seem to be broken in some way, demonstrating that he is the strongest in the group. If we then switch over to the opposite side of the hallway, the Angel Devil represents the 2 weakest ranks in heaven, which are the angels and the archangels. This choice was a very calculated move from Fujimoto, because in heaven, angels and archangels are the ones who interact the most with humanity. That's why the angel devil was able to fall in love with a human, make friends with humans, and was described by Captain Kishibe as a unique case who isn't hostile towards them, since, he literally represents the angels who are closest to mankind. Anyway, sitting to the right of him in the hallway is Princey the Spider Devil, who represents the angelic order of principalities, otherwise known as the ranking just above archangels. Next to her is Power, who represents a group of warrior angels known as Powers, and in the mythology, these angels were tasked with fighting demons, which explains a lot about Power's personality. According to Makima, the name of the headless devil next to Power is Virtues, which, as you probably guessed by now, is the name of the angels who rank above the ones we've already mentioned. In fact, as you go through each follower of Chainsaw Man from left to right, they all have names that are derived in some way from the hierarchy of angels, and they're ordered from lowest ranking to highest ranking in exactly the same way. This evidence strongly implies that Pochita's true identity is in some way connected to heaven, and on the next page, Makima said that his followers had been waiting for the day of his resurrection. The use of the word resurrection was such an intentional decision, since that word is very commonly associated with the Son of God, Jesus Christ. Fujimoto has referenced Jesus' resurrection on several occasions, like in chapter 62, when Denji is killed while in a crucifix position, only to then come back to life a couple chapters later. Crucifix imagery is also featured very heavily towards the end of part 1 of the manga, where we got this moment of Pochita literally crouching on top of one. However, the parallels don't even stop there, because in one of the anime endings there's a holy painting of Makima holding Chainsaw Man, in the same way that Jesus was held by the Virgin Mary. The famous painting on the right was designed hundreds of years ago by Michelangelo, and when you look at the images side by side, it couldn't be more obvious what the anime is trying to tell us. Based on all the clues we've discussed and the clues we're about to discuss, for me, there's no doubt that in this universe, Pochita's true identity is the son of the creator. If you're somehow still not convinced, consider that in chapter 84, we discovered that Chainsaw Man has the godlike ability to rewrite the universe. Whenever Pochita eats a devil, the thing that devil represents vanishes from reality, and a timeline gets rewritten as if it never existed in the first place. An example of this is how one time he ate the Nazi devil, and now in the present day, none of the characters have ever heard of them. Another example is how he ate the nuclear weapons devil, resulting in a brand new timeline where the Soviet Union never collapsed. As Makima said, Pochita's ability is so overpowered that not only does it manipulate history, but he alters people's memories so that no one remembers how things used to be. Realistically, there's no way a simple chainsaw devil should be this strong, because the ability to mold the universe goes way beyond anything we could reasonably expect. To me, this godlike power confirms the idea that Pochita is either the creator of the universe, or more likely the son of the creator, making him the equivalent to Jesus. What I'm going to do now is explain to you my theory on how a Jesus type character would end up becoming Chainsaw Man, but before we get into it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you've enjoyed the theory so far, and drop a like as it does help out the video. Okay, so what I think is going on here is that while Fujimoto has taken inspiration from various religious concepts, he's still adding his own twist to each idea. This is evident from his unique interpretation of hell, the 4 horsemen, and other quirky choices that deviate from Christianity, meaning this manga will never follow the Bible exactly. That being said, there are still clues in the anime that help us get a rough idea of events, and my suspicion is that in the beginning of the Chainsaw Man timeline, the only 2 dimensions were heaven and earth. In heaven, you had the creator who was able to alter reality in whatever way he wanted, and alongside him were a hierarchy of angels who were given free will. At some point, the most powerful angel Lucifer decided that he was worthy of taking God's power for himself, leading to the first of 2 wars between the angels. On Team Satan, there was 1/3 of heaven's population, including Makima and her sisters, who at the time would not have had the powers they have today. Meanwhile, on the holy side of the conflict, you had all the remaining characters we saw in the hallway like Angel, Power and Princey, and together they were able to defeat Satan and cast out his followers from heaven. The fallen angels then crashed to earth where they became known as devils, and my theory is that this is when Lucifer created his weird version of hell. My reasoning for this is that when they were banished from heaven, it was a time when God's influence on earth was literally everywhere, so it's logical that Satan would have wanted or needed somewhere to regather his forces. As a result, Lucifer, who we've already established was the strongest angel, was able to create a dimension that was the inverse of heaven. Importantly, this hell dimension could only be accessed by devils or humans who've sinned, making it impossible for the good angels in heaven to get in. Later on, this will explain why Pochita and his followers had to do the unthinkable and become devils, but before we get into that, we need to talk about how Satan would have improved his forces. In preparation for a second war, the devil naturally had to do something to make his army more powerful, and the first step was to corrupt humanity. The anime ending for episode 5 references this when we see a hand crush a golden apple, and this is a foreshadow of one of Lucifer's most calculated decisions. In the present day, we all know that devils get their strength from the fear of humans, but back in the beginning of time, fear didn't even exist in the Garden of Eden. Inside this paradise created by God, Adam and Eve had literally nothing to be afraid of, and without fear, the fallen angels would have been incredibly weak compared to today. Somewhere along the line, Satan must have realized that fear could be a potential power source for the devils, and so he snuck into the garden and tempted Eve to eat the golden apple. By giving in to his temptation, she introduced sin to the human race, and it was directly because of that sin that Adam said he felt fear for the first time. Over the following centuries, humanity would develop countless more fears after being banished from the garden, such as fear of hunger, fear of war, and fear of the dark. As humans became more and more corrupted, the devils in hell became more powerful, and over time they each embodied one fear that represented them best. In Makima's case, she turned into the control devil and gained all the abilities that come with that, while Lucifer also would have renounced his old name to become something new. My opinion on this is that he probably became the death devil, given that death is the thing that everyone is most afraid of. Whether it's fear of your own death, or the death of a relative, or the death of a pet, the fact is all of us have someone or something that we don't want to die. If I'm correct and Lucifer really is the death devil, then that would make him the fourth horseman of the apocalypse, or to put it another way, he's the older sibling of the control devil, war devil, and famine devil. That in itself would be a massive reveal, but what makes it crazier is that based on Fujimoto's track record, there's the undeniable possibility that Death is not a man, but instead has the appearance of a young woman. Ultimately, she's gonna be the final boss villain that Denji has to face, and the anime even alludes to this in this screenshot, where we see a chainsaw angel surrounded by the Grim Reaper. This type of angel here most closely resembles Thrones, who are one of the highest ranking angels in heaven, and the fact we see Pochita's ripcord behind it implies that at some stage, Denji might gain access to more angelic powers. If that happens, he'd be significantly more capable of facing off against Death, but as he is right now, in all likelihood he doesn't really stand a chance. Anyways, to explain how Satan failed in her original plan, we need to take a look at chapter 118. In that chapter, we found out that the four horsemen no longer have a good relationship, with Yoru describing Fami as crazy and confirming that they hadn't seen each other in years. Additionally, Makima implied that if she could rewrite reality, she'd use it to erase her 3 siblings from existence. Judging from this, we can assume that something bad must have happened to destroy their faith, and unsurprisingly, it can all be traced back to Chainsaw Man. Earlier on, we spoke about how his ability allows him to alter everyone's memories, but what I didn't mention is that the 4 horsemen are partly immune. On at least 2 occasions, we've seen how the War Devil and Control Devil still remember things that Pochita has erased, even when no one else in the universe seems to be able to. While the majority of humans and devils have no recollection of the old timelines, the horsemen are seemingly one of the few who can remember how the world used to be. Because of that, my guess is that seeing his godly power in action caused Makima and Famine to abandon their older sister, because in Pochita they found a devil who was somehow stronger than death itself. This would nicely explain why Makima constantly mentions how she's a fan of Chainsaw Man and was desperate to have his immense power under her control. In Fami's case, she's currently undercover in the Chainsaw Man fan club and has a suspicious fascination with Denji, while Yoru seems more interested in getting revenge than anything else. This obvious divide in the family likely began in the early 1980s, which is when the second war between the angels took place. For thousands of years, death had polluted humanity with millions of new fears, and after 2 world wars and the invention of nuclear weapons, the 80s saw humanity on the brink of annihilating itself. All of this fear meant that death had successfully diminished God's influence on the earth, and in the 80s, the strength of hell would have been at its peak. At the same time, up in heaven, something we need to acknowledge is that from the start, God has always respected the concept of free will. As an example, he gave the angels free will despite knowing it could lead to a rebellion against him, and he gave Adam and Eve a choice not to eat the apple rather than simply programming them to do what he wanted. Clearly, in one way or another, he wanted his creations to make their own decisions, so it makes sense why he didn't intervene as humanity became more and more corrupted. However, with Death's army now ready for war against heaven, I think that was the time where both he and the angels realized he'd made a mistake. To fix what he'd done, the creator gave his son the power to rewrite reality and permanently delete devils from existence by consuming them. With this ability, Pochita could keep altering the timeline with each devil he erased, until eventually humans would forget the influence that Satan had for thousands of years. For me, this is the most rational explanation for Pochita's insane abilities and the godlike imagery surrounding him, but one thing it doesn't explain is how he became a devil. Earlier we established that only fallen angels are allowed to enter hell, making it a place where Satan's army was constantly protected. Therefore, if Pochita wanted to defeat death, his two options were to either wait for Satan's army to attack heaven, or launch his own attack against hell. Of course, the problem with option number 2 is that to infiltrate hell you need to sin, because only then can you truly become a devil. In chapter 41, Angel confirms this when he says that he's now a devil first and an angel second, indicating that the transformation permanently alters their physiology. Anyhow, back in the 1980s, Pochita and his followers willingly made a transition into fallen angels, where they each chose one fear they wanted to represent. For whatever reason, Princey chose spiders, Galgali chose violence, Power chose blood, and Angel chose angels, while the Son of God decided to pick chainsaws. It's hard to know exactly what about chainsaws was so appealing, but considering that Pochita's mission was to massacre devils in hell, he likely wanted to embody something that would make doing that a lot easier. Also, with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre being released in cinemas only a few years earlier, it's feasible that Fujimoto's version of Jesus just really enjoyed the movie. After becoming devils, Team Chainsaw Man were then able to burst into hell, where they immediately began erasing dozens of fallen angels. During this massacre, Pochita wiped out the Nuclear Weapons Devil, the AIDS Devil, the Sixth Sense Devil, and the World War II Devil, and with each devil that got eaten, the timeline would rewrite itself so that those fears never existed. This massacre is referenced in the anime itself, where in episode 2 we saw another one of Draw's paintings, in which a demon tortures a sinner who's trying to escape from hell. The painting is seen for a second time in the opening shot of the intro, just as Denji pulls his ripcord, and to me this symbolizes the Chainsaw Devil punishing the fallen angels who'd corrupted humanity. From his point of view, the devils that he was erasing were sinners, and just like how it's the demon's job in this painting to punish humans, for Chainsaw Man it's his job to eradicate the devils themselves. As all of these fears disappeared from human consciousness one by one, it's a fact that Satan's army would have gotten significantly weaker since humans would naturally begin to feel less afraid. An embarrassing defeat like that is likely what led to the rest of the devils losing faith in her, and it's why the 4 horsemen split up to do their own thing. Remember, Pochita said in chapter 97 that Makima always wanted a family, implying that the relationship she had with her siblings wasn't really that special in the first place. Following that, Chainsaw Man spent an unknown amount of time eating more and more devils until he one day accidentally messed up the timeline. If we look back at chapter 84 again, Makima said that there used to be 4 conclusions other than death at the end of living beings' lifespans, but when Chainsaw Man erased those possibilities, it led to the current situation where devils respawn on Earth after they die. We know for certain that in previous timelines, devils didn't used to physically manifest on Earth like this, and I can say that for sure because some of those old timelines were the same as ours before Pochita erased them. Therefore, it was likely a result of his meddling with reality that humans and devils ended up in their current situation, and in 1984, Makima decided that she wanted to mold the universe the way she wanted. For those of you who haven't seen my 1984 theory, then click the link on screen as that will explain pretty much everything that happened between that year and the present day. But for everyone else, that's pretty much it for this video. I suppose the one lingering question about all of this is where the Death Devil has been since the second war between the angels, but personally, if I had to guess, I'd say she's been in hiding, and her main goal right now should be to rewrite the timeline again to make it so that Chainsaw Man never existed. It's possible that either Yoshida or Fami are helping her with this, because it's still unclear exactly what their motivations are, but let me know what you think in the comments down below. Lastly, if you enjoyed the video, then don't forget to subscribe for more theories and explanations like this, and as always, I'd appreciate if you hit the like button as well and share the video if you're feeling generous. Thanks for watching as always, and until the next one, peace out.